Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The Department of Agriculture takes another step to keep farmers in business and feed Americans in need. The fight against the virus, two new inventions have been approved. One new treatment and one new test method are being put to the use in the U.S. Attorney General William Barr has defended FBI Director Christopher Wray. Wray has been accused of mishandling documents related to the case of Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor. California is now making mail-in voting available for all registered voters. The governor wants to help maintain distancing guidelines during the presidential election. And the Department of Homeland Security is changing the visa rules for Chinese journalists. They'll only get 90-day renewable visas instead of the open-ended ones they were issued previously. American farmers are struggling to get their goods to market because of disruption caused by the pandemic. Some are throwing out food and calling for government help. That's why on Friday, the Department of Agriculture approved over $1 billion to get farm-raised goods to hungry Americans.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture approved $1.2 billion in contracts to help farmers put their excess food to good use, feeding those in need. The funds are part of the administration's Families First Coronavirus Response Act, a move to buy $3 billion worth of excess food from suppliers and deliver it to nonprofits and food banks.
And it's a great testament to the innovation and creativity and the perseverance of the American worker.
Secretary of Agriculture is reassuring the public that the supply chain is stable. His comments follow a temporary shutdown last week for many meat packaging plants after hundreds of employees got sick with the virus. One CEO reminds everyone that it's a tough call to make. He's asking workers to come into work to keep the U.S. food supply chain strong.
So I just want the American people to know that these employees really deserve a lot of gratitude.
The same day the new initiative was announced, the Department of Agriculture revealed that 14 meat processing plants that temporarily closed are opening back up.
From the first day that the coronavirus emerged in the United States up until this very day, the food supply in America has remained strong.
Vice President Mike Pence also commented on the nation's resilient response to the national emergency. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And to fight the spread of the virus, people are inventing new treatments and medical technologies. 2 more items have been approved and are about to be put to use in the U.S.
2 new items to fight the spread of the virus have been approved, some on a limited basis, and are now being used on the front line. One of them is an experimental antiviral medication called remdesivir, which might be able to help fight the virus. The medication has already been sent to 7 states across the U.S. New York got the most because it has the most confirmed cases and hospitalizations in the nation. The Department of Health and Human Services said the process of shipping to 5 other states has already been finalized. Patients receiving the doses must be infected with the virus and be receiving some type of breathing support. The second item was approved yesterday and is about to be used for emergencies. It's an antigen test designed for rapid virus detection. Antigen tests detect the presence of the disease, while antibody tests indicate past infection. FDA Chief Scientist Denise Hinton said that the test is believed to be effective and that the known benefits outweigh the known risks. Hinton added that the test's emergency use approval does not mean it's been cleared for widespread use, only for use by authorized laboratories. FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn entered self-quarantine on Friday after coming into contact with someone who tested positive for the virus. The commissioner already took a test which came back negative, but he said he'd self-quarantine anyways, in line with what the CDC guidelines ask for.
And taking a look at the latest happenings around the nation, more states are inching toward opening their economies, but Pennsylvania's governor is facing defiance from 2 counties who say he's not moving fast enough. And in New York, sadly, 3 children are dead from an unknown disease believed to be linked to the CCP virus. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more.
At least 4 states are inching towards normalcy today. California is one of them, opening flower shops just in time for Mother's Day.
Yeah, it's getting crazy. Phone is just ringing off the hook. Everybody wants to order flowers. They're so happy that we are open.
Beautiful colors to admire, but no smelling the roses for now. In Pennsylvania, some counties are allowed to reopen, but others are under strict lockdown measures. 2 counties announced they'll lift pandemic restrictions ahead of governor's orders. As for the nation's virus hotspot, New York's hospitalization rate and new cases continue to drop.
You see, it hasn't been that level since we started.
But 226 lost their lives yesterday, and 3 children passed away from a rare inflammatory syndrome that Cuomo says may be linked to the virus.
These children happen to have the COVID antibodies or be positive for COVID, but those were not the symptoms they showed when they came into the hospital system.
Similar events have been reported before by British authorities. Now, the New York Department of Health is working with the state's Genome Center and Rockefeller University to try to understand what happened. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The CDC is asking New York to create national criteria for finding and treating the unknown disease that struck the children. And in California, it's become the first U.S. state to allow mail-in voting for November's general election. Governor Newsom says the ballots will start to be mailed out 29 days before the election.
Governor Gavin Newsom on Friday signed an executive order to allow every voter in California to submit their ballots by mail. It's the first state to do so. Newsom says it's a way to help people stay safe while still making their voices heard.
There's a lot of concern and anxiety around this November's election in terms of making sure that you can conduct yourself in a safe way and to make sure your health is protected and to make sure that we are reaching out to all registered eligible voters.
Physical sites in California will also operate for anyone who wants to vote in person.
People that otherwise are not familiar with mail-in ballots, are uncomfortable with them, may have disabilities, may have other issues that may preclude that as an appropriate option.
While Democrats say mail-in ballots will help maintain voter turnout, some Republicans, including President Trump, say mail-in votes are more susceptible to abuse on a large scale.
In a tweet this afternoon, the president said he isn't happy with the decision. He's accused the governor of using mail-in voting for political gain. And last weekend was a sunny one in the northeast U.S., but a polar vortex is bringing back the winter chill this weekend. At least 20 states have issued warnings and advisories.
A polar vortex is cracking its icy whips in the northeast. New England is expected to be hit with wind gusts and 6 to 12 inches of wet snow over the weekend. That's a stark contrast to the sunny weather seen last week. Some New Jerseyans woke up to snow on Saturday. A resident from Newton caught the winter-like weather on camera Friday night when parts of New Jersey fell into freezing temperatures. The snow even reached New York City's Central Park. The National Weather Service said the last time it ever snowed this late in the year was in 1977, more than 40 years ago. The bitter cold is thanks to the polar vortex that began in the Great Lakes region.
Attorney General William Barr says he still has full confidence in FBI Director Christopher Wray. Wray has been accused of mishandling documents related to the controversial Michael Flynn case. The DOJ dropped the case last week after Barr said the FBI may have pressured the former national security advisor into lying.
Attorney General William Barr says he still has confidence in the FBI Director Christopher Wray. Wray faced mounting criticism in recent weeks for his handling of the Michael Flynn case. Critics say he either suppressed or slow-walked documents in the FBI's investigation into Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor. Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI in a 2017 interview, but the Department of Justice dropped the case on Thursday after the documents were unsealed. One note from an FBI official asked, "What is our goal? Truth/omission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired?" Barr said the case was dropped because the FBI's interview seemed to have been undertaken only to elicit those very false statements and thereby criminalize Mr. Flynn. Wray wasn't the FBI director at the time of Flynn's interview, but critics say he mishandled the subsequent DOJ investigation. But Barr says it's not possible for the FBI director to ensure all documents are produced every time the DOJ asks for them. He says he still has full confidence in Wray to reform the FBI.
The Department of Homeland Security is tightening the rules for Chinese journalists. The new rules are aimed at protecting national security.
Washington issued new rules on Friday regarding visas for journalists from China. Chinese journalists will now only get 90-day visas, but they can be renewed. Previously, the journalists were issued open-ended visas with no extension needed under normal circumstances. The Department of Homeland Security issued the rule while pointing out the Chinese regime's suppression of independent journalism. The rule comes after the Chinese regime kicked out 3 Wall Street Journal correspondents in March and imposed other restrictive measures on U.S. journalists reporting from China. A day before that, the State Department designated several Chinese media operating in the U.S. as foreign embassies. It was done to point out that the companies aren't independent. They're actually state actors pushing Communist Party propaganda. A Department of Homeland Security official said the new rules will likely reduce the number of Chinese journalists in the U.S. and scrutinize those staying here more closely. U.S. officials say the move will strengthen national security protections. The new rules don't apply to journalists from the Chinese territories of Hong Kong or Macau.
In our international roundup, the British government is committing to invest nearly $2.5 billion in cycling projects. Spain starts to reopen, and a school in the Netherlands protects its students with plastic shields.
The British government has announced £2 billion in funding for cycling and walking projects. Measures will include pop-up bike lanes and wider pavements, as well as cycle-only streets. The number of cyclists has gone up by 70% in some places. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is asking people to use good judgment as over half of the country moves to phase 1 of a 4-step reopening plan. The country's 2 biggest cities, Madrid and Barcelona, didn't meet the criteria for easing and will remain on phase 0. Over 1,000 people lined up to receive free food in Geneva. It stretched for more than half a mile, with some people lining up from 5 a.m. Geneva is said to be the second most expensive city in the world after Swiss city Zurich. Residents said they were grateful for the support. In the Netherlands, plastic shields have been installed around students' desks to keep them safe as elementary schools start to reopen. New infections have been declining for weeks, but high schools are not due to open until June.
Up next, a look at China's history of vaccine scandals and what it means for the country's current development of a virus vaccine. More on that when we return.
The CCP virus sweeping across the world, striking New York.
We could have prevented the job loss and the death and the sickness and disease around the world had China not lied.
How did we get here?
This decision will go down as the most consequential and the most dangerous mistake in history.
Careful raising a baby tiger, because one day it will grow up and eat you.
What's the cure for the CCP virus?
China has been rushing to develop a vaccine for the CCP virus, but the history of the country's scandal-plagued vaccine industry is causing concern over the quality of their product.
China has been touting its success in the race to develop a vaccine for the CCP virus, commonly known as the novel coronavirus. Around 10 drug makers are at the stage of conducting human trials. 3 of those companies are in China. One of them is the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products. The state-owned company said last week they are preparing for mass production of the vaccine. But for some, this doesn't sound like good news. This is He Fangmei, an ordinary Chinese mother. She says her 6-year-old daughter was left with paralyzed legs after being given a vaccine made by the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products. She protested along with other victims in front of China's National Health Commission headquarters in February last year. Instead of being answered, she was arrested for picking quarrels and stirring up trouble and detained for 10 months. China's vaccine industry has been plagued by scandals. From 2007 to 2018, at least 13 major manufacturers in China were found to be producing defective vaccines causing severe side effects. In some cases, hundreds of thousands of faulty vaccines were disseminated. In 2013, a Chinese journalist made a documentary, Vaccine Wounds, highlighting nearly 100 children who became paralyzed or mentally disabled after being given bad vaccines. Authorities have generally taken little action against the offenders. In some cases, companies simply changed their name and continued to operate as normal. Meanwhile, whistleblowers and parents who spoke up were often punished. For example, in 2010, a journalist revealed that over 100 children in Jiangxi province either died or became sick after being given vaccines. The article sparked huge public outcry in China. Provincial officials denied there were any problems with the vaccines. Meanwhile, parents demanding answers were threatened by authorities not to make small troubles. The journalist was fired and the chief editor at the state-run newspaper was removed. Chinese officials have publicly called vaccine quality problems a red line that cannot be crossed. Yet drug makers have repeatedly crossed that line without facing significant consequences. Why is China's pharmaceutical industry so lacking in accountability? Because all the major players are either state-owned companies or companies owned by people with close ties to high-ranking Communist Party officials. The Wuhan Institute of Biological Products that's currently developing a virus vaccine has been involved in multiple scandals. The most recent one was in 2017. Over 400,000 DTP vaccines were found to be defective. Children in China can't start school without being given the DTP vaccine cocktail for diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. The scandal provoked anger and panic among Chinese parents. The Wuhan company produces 80% of China's DTP vaccines. State authorities stated the contamination was caused by a rare accident and that 99.6% of China's vaccines pass inspection. Fines were imposed and company officers were allegedly punished, but no details of the actions were ever given. There has also never been reporting on what happened to the children who received the vaccines. Some Chinese officials have been removed from their positions in the wake of scandals, but very often they are later given a new position. For example, Sun Xianze, responsible for drug safety during the DTP scandal, was in charge of food safety during the 2012 scandal involving contaminated baby formula. Chen Bingzhong, a former senior official from China's National Health Commission, said it's ironic that China claims to be leading the race to find a vaccine in the current pandemic. He says toxic vaccines have harmed or killed tens of thousands of children in China, yet there's a lack of punishment, compensation, or apology.
So this is the precedent we are looking at here. Now China is again developing vaccines. How can it be trusted?
Since being released from prison, He Fangmei has continued seeking justice for her paralyzed daughter. On Wednesday, she walked to Beijing to appeal to the authorities.
I'm so tired. My legs are shaking. On the road, I passed through many villages. I was very scared. There are graveyards on my way, and wild dogs chase me. Sigh, I don't know how to describe my feeling.
She also posted this photo on Twitter. The posters read, "To the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products, before you sell your virus vaccines, can you do some good deeds for the children victimized by the vaccine and accumulate some virtue?"
Up next, concerns over children's privacy on TikTok. A Dutch data watchdog investigates. U.S. officials have also raised security concerns over the China-based app. More on that when we return.
How do we get to this point? Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
And another investigation into TikTok. This time, a Dutch privacy watchdog is looking into whether or not the app protects children's data enough.
The Dutch Data Protection Authority has launched an investigation into the Chinese video sharing app TikTok. The data watchdog says many children in the Netherlands are using the China-based app, so it wants to find out whether it's protecting their personal information well enough. This isn't the first time the app has been scrutinized. U.S. officials have called the app a national security risk because user data could be given to the Chinese communist regime at any time. Under China's national intelligence law, Chinese companies inside and out of China must give Beijing whatever data it asks for. Meanwhile, TikTok claims it's not subject to the law. Data Reportal says the app has 800 million monthly active users. The data watchdog is expected to publish its initial findings later this year. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Jeep's latest Wrangler shows an alarming tendency to tip over in crash tests. As a result, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is giving the newest Wrangler a marginal rating.
The new Wrangler received the second worst of 4 possible ratings in one type of crash test, thanks to its tendency to tip over. The Insurance Institute says their findings apply to the 2019 and 2020 editions of the Jeep Wrangler. In the test, the Jeep actually did a good job of protecting the driver from the actual impact. But tipping over is a major problem because it can lead to the occupants being ejected from the vehicle. In response, Fiat Chrysler says it's unaware of this ever happening in a real crash. The company has manufactured more than 500,000 of these models. Fiat Chrysler also points out that the Wrangler meets or exceeds all government safety standards.
With many of us spending more time on social media during the pandemic, the Better Business Bureau is sending out a new warning. It says to watch out for scammers.
A lot of rip-off artists are now using social media sites like Facebook to offer counterfeit coupons. Many have seasonal or gift-giving themes, with Mother's Day on Sunday and more virtual graduations taking place. The most frequently distributed fake coupons are for Costco, Starbucks, and Trader Joe's. The Better Business Bureau says consumers should be skeptical. The better a deal looks, the more likely it's a scam. Often a dead giveaway that a coupon is fake if it doesn't have an expiration date. If you're unsure, you can do a web search about the offer to see if it's legitimate. The agency also says to watch out if the site wants your personal information. Some may contain malware or put viruses on your computer. Any promotional offer that asks for personal information is almost always a scam. If you want to learn more, the website bbb.org has the latest information.
Coming up, witness a tribute to healthcare workers and first responders as it soars across the nation's skies. Find out more about the U.S. military's Operation America Strong when we return. The U.S. military is taking time to thank the men and women helping to keep the country running despite the lockdown. In a tribute to first responders, 2 elite flight squads, the Navy's Blue Angels and the Air Force's Thunderbirds, have been soaring above some of the cities and states hit hardest by the virus crisis.
1,500 feet above New York City, the Navy's Blue Angels and the Air Force's Thunderbirds streaked through the sky above the U.S. virus hotspot on April 28th. The 2 squadrons usually don't fly within 150 miles of each other, but they received special permission to thank first responders, military personnel, and essential workers. The same day, the 2 teams put on a similar show over Pennsylvania's largest city, Philadelphia. Days later, on May 1st, Air Force pilots paid tribute to frontline workers in a flight over Arizona. They were joined by Arizona Air National Guard aircraft, combining to perform the 15-jet spectacle. Later that day, the Blue Angels flew their F-18 jets over New Orleans, Louisiana to show their gratitude. Next came Oklahoma, which received a similar military salute. Also on the schedule, the nation's capital. Both squads roared above attractions like the National Mall, the Washington Monument, and the Marine Corps War Memorial on May 2nd. The jets also took the skies above nearby Baltimore and Prince George's Hospital in Maryland the same day. Later that afternoon, the groups each flew over downtown Atlanta, Georgia, greeted by thousands of enthusiastic audience members on the ground. Back on April 11th, the Thunderbirds also performed above the glitz and glam of Las Vegas. And their latest stunt so far, the Blue Angels have taken flight over the palm trees and blue waters native to Florida. The tributes came as Americans in some states begin to emerge from lockdowns and stay-at-home orders.
Hopefully it brings them a little bit of a sense of pride. Hopefully it brings them a sense of hope and reminds us all that, we're all Americans in this battle together.
The flyover tributes to first responders are part of a mission dubbed Operation America Strong. The eye-catching idea to give back reportedly came from service members themselves.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.